Earlier today, Oblivion Remastered got its very first update. Bethesda was quick on the turnaround here, as it was a mere 7 weeks since the initial release of this game for this first bug-fixing update to release for everyone. As you can probably tell, I do have some thoughts on this update, which I will go over a bit later in this video, and Bethesda even updated us to say that another update is on the way, meant to address some of the lingering performance issues in Oblivion Remastered. And at least in my case on PC, I actually noticed some additional performance issues with today's update as well. But otherwise, Oblivion's Patch 1 was a 15GB download that contained a plethora of fixes. A big one for the creators and photographers out there, the toggle HUD visibility as well as show HUD console commands were enabled finally. So now you could use these to easily turn off your HUD whenever you want. And you can even couple this with something like toggle debug camera for a HUD-less free cam to finally get some of those panning or flying shots in Oblivion. This of course is super handy. The only other way to disable the HUD, which trust me I had to do this for a bunch of videos, was to download mods, and it just felt ridiculous. Oftentimes I'd have to download several different mods just to get my HUD off. What is honestly probably going to be one of the biggest changes from this one is now the local map will automatically open when using your map in interior spaces. And for better or for worse, this is only true for interior cells. Things like cities will still default to the world map, but for interiors, this is really nice. You're just going to see that interior location and have a far easier job of finding whatever door is nearby. Although any amount of zooming out will still revert you to the world map. And also just a quick tip on PC, if you're in a city and you open and close the map using the tab key, it'll save that setting. So if you're on the local map, it'll keep you there. If you're on the world map, it'll keep you there. Just make sure you use tab. A bit of a silly one, but the Redguard origins were fixed. Originally, the Mountain Redguard was meant to be good at conversing, while the Desert Redguard was meant to be good at combat. But on release, the stat changes were actually flipped. Thankfully, with today's update, that has been restored, so now, yes, the Mountain Redguard will actually be good at conversing. The Staff of Sheogorath was finally fixed. This is one of the most unique weapons in the game right now, so this is a pretty cool one. On use, it has an area of effect attack that is going to freeze enemies who are attacking you, but it'll also make them invulnerable. So you could almost think of this like pausing time for all of those attackers, just pausing that combat encounter and giving you the opportunity to reposition or just run away. Except, previously, that didn't actually work, as oftentimes enemies would still be able to follow or chase you, seriously negating the impact of this staff, but thankfully with today's update this was fully resolved, and everyone is frozen as they should be. One of the annoying bugs that was fixed is, for a lot of the light spells like Starlight, if you're playing in first person and triggered this, you just wouldn't be able to see any of the light effects. Which of course is a big deal because it's just lighting up the area around you. You kind of need that. You could quickly and easily fix this by just swapping to third person, but thankfully today that was fixed and now everything's working properly. But there was also the opposite bug with certain effects applying for too long. For some players, after unequipping chameleon enchanted items, the chameleon effect would just stay on your character. It's not like this was just there for the moment or until you restarted the game. No, this would persist on that entire save game. You were kind of stuck being partially invisible and there isn't much you could do about it. Thankfully today, this bug was also resolved. They did fix that hilarious bug where the first-person camera would sometimes be placed above your head, making you look like an absolute unit, and all the other NPCs just seem incredibly small. Thankfully, that was resolved, but what unfortunately wasn't resolved are all of the races being the same height or sometimes unintentionally being different heights. In Oblivion, each race is technically supposed to have a different height. In the remaster, this will apply for other NPCs, but if you choose a tall race, things get pretty buggy. Sometimes the tall races were too tall, making it so you literally couldn't get through a doorway or stairwell, and other times just way too short. Unfortunately, that bug wasn't fixed today. A ton of the general issues leading to progress lost were addressed with this update, things like infinite load screens, the issue where the game would freeze when alt-tabbing and trying to return, as well as a variety of the general crash fixes were resolved. But also some of the frustrating quest bugs or progress blockers. NPCs getting stuck during the battle for Kvatch was resolved, but not on existing saves. Unfortunately, what you'll notice is with a lot of these bug fixes, you have to have a save before the bug triggered for it to actually be resolved. Like here, I made the save after the bug happened, so it's still broken. On release for a ton of players, Vincente Valtieri's hair was just gone. Honestly, this was a bit of an upgrade. I think a lot of people really like this look, but with this update, his hair was restored, or at least Bethesda gave him a very nice looking wig. One of the annoying Thieves Guild bugs was this initial NPC just wouldn't spawn. Thankfully with today's update, that was fixed. But one of the separate Thieves Guild bugs, where one of the NPCs just doesn't forge this letter that you need to progress the quest, wasn't fixed. This one's still in the game. So for many players out there, unfortunately, yeah, you're still not going to be able to progress this questline without some kind of workaround or a console command. And lastly, sometimes Captain Dougal would just not spawn during this fight, and that was finally fixed as well. There are some other more minor changes from this update, but I honestly think for a lot of you, the biggest changes are going to be the ability to turn on and off your HUD on PC, as well as actually having the local map open properly now in interiors. And just overall, I have to say, this is an abysmal update for 7 weeks of progress. The fact that this took 7 weeks to release, but then just doesn't address even some of the biggest issues or lingering complaints around this game is honestly quite baffling to me. Like, what has been going on for the past 7 weeks? Perhaps development and updates are still incredibly difficult with Oblivion. It's using this weird dual engine setup where it's Gamebryo with Unreal Engine layered on top of it to some degree. But if you recall, this was also, to a lesser degree, a problem with Starfield. It got this initial super tiny hotfix like a week or two after release, but then 3 weeks later, this was still the biggest update we had gotten. The patching with that game was incredibly slow, and now we're seeing an even more extreme example with Oblivion. But even if Oblivion is very difficult to patch and work on, some simpler stuff that mods addressed a month ago is still an issue in this game. The difficulty in Oblivion is still insanely tuned. One step up to expert and enemies will be destroying you and you can barely touch them. I honestly can't believe this update didn't address anything around this. The unofficial Elder Scrolls pages set up this really nice list of new bugs introduced with the remastered version of Oblivion, and as you can see, this patch, after 7 weeks, barely touches this rather immense list. I mean, even just some of the big progress-blocking quest issues aren't all addressed with this update. Of course, the other major pillar is performance, and I do have good and bad news on that front. First, the bad news. For both me as well as several other players on PC, I think I'm getting slightly more stutters and just generally a bit worse performance after installing this update. Immediately after installing, I got a bunch of stutters and even a nice crash within my first 10 minutes of playing, so I did a full fresh install of the game, but sadly the stutters continued, although I didn't crash again during my playtime. So yeah, immediately after installing this update, you might notice the game's running slightly worse. But there's also good news, because a performance update is coming, and it sounds like it might be coming soon. As of right now, Bethesda has said, our second update will focus on performance, and we'll share more details when we are able. But technically, earlier in this document, they do say that both updates should be launched in the coming weeks, which would imply the performance update is merely weeks away now. But beyond that, we have no concrete details as far as what this performance update will entail, or even when it's coming out. And honestly, I just gotta wonder, what happened here? The scale of this patch aside, it does really make me wonder why this took so long. Like, even some of these basic features, like fixing this initial Kvatch quest or adding the ability to turn on or off your HUD. Those are things that should have been hotfixed in a week or two after release. At this point, it feels like the vast majority of people who are going to play Oblivion Remastered have played Oblivion Remastered and just moved on. The modding scene isn't exactly thriving. The performance issues are absolutely plaguing this game. I know of several people who have just walked away out of frustration over the performance. And while the game did have this insane launch that I feel like all of us are going to remember for forever, just because of how cool of a moment that was in gaming, so far I found the post-launch support to be incredibly disappointing. These updates are too small and taking way too long. And the real disappointing part is, this is just becoming a worrying trend for Bethesda. Like I just pointed out, the same thing happened with Starfield to a degree, but also when it comes to Fallout 4, they broke that game with the next-gen update, which also released, partially broken, and then just never fixed Fallout 4. That game is still broken as of right now for a ton of players. With that said, that is your update on Oblivion Remastered. I should have more details on a second update coming shortly, but until then, get subscribed and check out this video.